Hey, thanks, Maddie. I just want to thank everyone for taking time out of their busy days today to listen in on as we share important information about the next release in August of our web services version 21.0, and we'll be covering the schema changes today. And I'm here to handle the introduction, and we'll be back later for Q&A. Many of you who have attended these webinars in the past recall that this initial speaking slot would have been covered by my colleague, Bill Vanita. But Bill retired from EPA service at the end of 2022. So I'm trying to step in and fill his shoes at this point. And after I finish the introduction, the bulk of the presentation will be covered by Josh Williams of our support contractor, GDIT, and my colleague, Leslie Cook of the Energy Star Buildings program. Okay, next slide. So the agenda, I'm going to give you sort of an overview, sort of a sense of the web services user community. And then the bulk of the time is going to be spent on covering the details of changes in release 21.0, and those are listed out here. And then Leslie will jump in and speak to some of the other upcoming enhancements in 2023, and then we'll leave time for question and answer. Next slide. In terms of our web services user community review, in the big picture, we now have about 400 users exchanging data with the tool, comprising 250,000 plus buildings. That represents more than 80% of all the benchmark properties in Portfolio Manager over the past 12 months. Nearly 30% of that web services volume is now driven by utilities that are populating customer Portfolio Manager accounts to help with benchmarking. And EPA, we're continuing on our efforts to support growing a volume of traffic and improve the overall system performance. And to give a little more details about customer support, just reminders, release notes provide a list of changes for each release, and that's an important resource. And the standard weekly maintenance window is listed out here, Monday through Thursday evenings and on Sunday evening. This year to date, we've had nearly 160 web service tickets that we've handled. Web service questions and inquiries account for a small percentage of our overall support questions, about 4%. But they are always prioritized because we realize that each individual user represents many buildings, and we want to turn our questions around and be responsive as quickly as possible. And again, as a reminder, if you have unanswered questions, try the FAQ portal or submit at the portal your question. Next slide. And finally, just the trend in Portfolio Manager benchmarking overall, which is the red line, and then the volume handled by web services is the blue line. So there's a little bit of waviness, but clearly an upward trend, continues into 2023. And with that, I'll turn it over to Josh to cover the details of the 21.0 release.
Thank you, Tracy. All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joshua Williams. I'm a senior developer on the Portfolio Manager project, and I'll walk you guys through the 21.0 details. So the first slide we have here is the release 21 schedule. It was released on the 25th, so earlier this week, and is available right now. And this is scheduled to go to live on August 27th and available to the public on the 28th. We will have a scheduled maintenance between 8 a.m. and 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time during the release for live. We have separate links here for our documentation to show the current version of Live 20.3 and Test 21.0. And these links will show you the respective documentation for the web services. And from now until the live release, it's just we're pointing out and reiterating that they are running different versions. Okay. So the content of the 21.0 release is we have a lot of model and property use updates, which involves the U.S. vehicle dealership, the Canadian bank branch, the Canadian worship facility, the Canadian mailing center and post office. We also have some adjustment updates for parking lots and parking garages, some metric name updates, factor updates for our reference data, and a brand new sample property API for the test environment. So to start off, there are new 1 to 100 Energy Star score models for the following types. The vehicle dealership, the Canadian bank branch, the Canadian worship facility, and the mailing center / post office. And they will be live with the 21.0 live release on August 27th. So the first one we would like to talk about here is the vehicle dealership. This was formerly known as automobile dealership. So going forward, the automobile dealership will be renamed to a vehicle dealership. All associated web service metric names will be updated to reflect this name change. So we will cover those changes in detail a little bit later in the slide, but that's important to note for any existing get metric calls that some names have changed in regards to any vehicle dealership metrics. The primary function element of property XSD, so when you're going to create a property, there is an element called primary function, and it has an enumeration that will now expect vehicle dealership instead of automobile dealership as it did previously. And this applies to both US and Canadian properties. We decided to update this name to be more inclusive because the new 100 score also includes dealerships that sell various types of vehicles, light, medium, and heavy duty cars and trucks. Excuse me. So here's some, starting with the actual updates. We're adding 3 new use details to the vehicle dealership: the average number of vehicles in the inventory, the percent that can be heated, and the percent that can be cooled. And along with those new use details, there'll be new metrics corresponding to each one. Average number of vehicles in the inventory will have 2. It will have, of course, the actual value and then a density value based on the GFA of the property. And then 1 respectively for heated and cooled. See, so here is a table detailing the new element names as you would pass them in when you in your XML bodies. Average number of vehicles. It does have a default, so if you omit it, it will be populated with the default value that is density based of 7.6 per 1,000 square feet. Percent that can be heated is also a defaultable with a value of 100%. Percent that can be cooled is a defaultable value with 100% default value as well. The number of workers here on main shift is an existing use detail associated with automobile or vehicle dealerships. And we are backfilling this because it is now a defaultable field to 1.7 to 1,000 per square feet. And if you have a value stored on a property for number of workers, it will remain. Only if it is currently blank will it be populated to the new default as part of the release. Okay, and that pretty much wraps up the changes for vehicle dealership, all the use details changes. Moving on to the Canadian bank branch. The Canadian bank branch model has been updated with new reference data and coefficients for score calculation. The US scores will remain unchanged. They will be retaining their current reference and coefficient values. Canadian scores will be updated due to the new reference and coefficient values. There are no use detail changes and no metric changes, so simple score changes will be reflected though, based on this update. The next model update is the Canadian Worship Facility. The worship facility will now be a scoreable property type. It was not before. So this is a brand new 1 to 100 Energy Star score. The US scores will remain unchanged and Canadian properties will now receive a score. There is also a new use detail that we are associating with worship facility that applies to both US and Canadian, which is ceiling height. Ceiling height will have one new use detail and one new metric associated with it. And it is also a defaultable value with a value of 20. Let's see. All right, and for our last model update is the Canadian Mailing Center and Post Office. The Mail Center and Post Office will now be a scoreable property. US properties are not eligible to receive a score, but Canada will now be able to. There are 4 new use details associated with the Mailing Center and Post Office. First is delivery facility. This is a yes/no use detail, just a yes or no. Number of letters and packages per year, % that can be heated, % that can be cooled, and then metrics associated with each new use detail. Number of letters and packages has a regular one for the value, and then a density based on your GFA of your property. All right, and here is the default values for the use details for Mailing Center. Delivery facility has a default value of yes. Number of letters and packages per year is a density-based default with 250,000 per 1,000 square feet. % that can be heated and % that can be cooled are both default values of 100%. The number of workers on main shift, similar to the worship facility update, or sorry, vehicle dealership update, is an existing use detail, which will be backfilled with the default density value of 2 per 1,000 square feet. Again, if you have if a property you have already has a value for number of workers, it will remain. The same applies for weekly operating hours. It's an existing use detail that now has a default value of 80. Okay. And that wraps up the changes for the Mailing Center for model updates. This is a list of the impacted services for the use detail changes. All of these services are used just in support of use details. The first is adding a property use. Of course, these new elements will be accepted in the XML body for this post for a property use, creating a property use. And they will also be returned in gets for property uses. Same with the use details and divisions and so on. It's all the new elements being supported by these existing services. And we do, of course, have all updated API documentation on the live environment, or posted online for us. So now moving on to the metric details themselves for all the new use details associated with all the model updates that we've done. They will be available during via the standard get metrics, and it returns a time-weighted value for the specified property and annual reporting period. So if you have some historical characteristic use details, of course, it will return those values. Also, you can call the use details metric service for these particular metrics. And we also have a list posted of all of our existing metrics. So the first set here in this table starts with the vehicle dealership, average number of vehicles in inventory. They all start with, or it starts with vehicle dealership prefix, average number of vehicles in inventory. All of our metrics are camel cased. And then we also have vehicle dealership vehicle density, % that can be heated, % that can be cooled. And then we move to worship facility that has the new ceiling height metric. So the new ceiling height metric name is worship facility ceiling height. Mailing center has delivery facility, mailing center, post office delivery center. It also has the number of letters and packages, mailing center, post office, number of letter and packages per year. Kind of a long one, but it works out. And we move on to the next page, which is just the last remaining metrics, which is the number of mail center, post office letters, packages per year density, as well as the percent heated and percent cooled metric names for mailing center and post office. And that wraps up all the new use detail metric names. So moving on to the existing metric updates. So these are the ones that we want to point out because it's very important to take note of these. If you're some of your web service calls may have issues if you don't have these names before the live release. Okay. So it is right now as said before, we have renamed the automobile dealership to vehicle dealership. As a result, all existing metrics are referencing automobile dealership are being updated. So the old web service metric names used to be prefixed with automobile dealership, or at least contained automobile, and now it will be prefixed with vehicle and contain vehicle. So that's important to note for any get metric calls. Okay, we're moving on to the adjustments updates for parking lots and parking garages. All right, so engineering adjustments for parking structures co-located with a property can be applied to the 1 to 100 Energy Star score. These adjustment calculations are getting updated to reflect the most recent available market data about parking energy. The parking adjustment update applies to all Canadian property types eligible for the Energy Star score. And at this time, it only applies to the US vehicle dealerships. First in the score preview, which we'll release with score preview, and then later with the live release in the final model when we finalize the model for US vehicle dealerships. The update will be applied to all other US property types as part of a future Energy Star score update. Okay, along with our release, we're doing some annual updates to our factors and reference data, keeping everything up to date. This will include GHG emission factors for plant-specific and regional electricity based on new eGrid data that we've been provided. Also new default fuel cost data, default fuel mix, the weather station mappings, and the national median EUI values. And all of this will be available as a reference documentation for specifics. Okay. Lastly, here we have a sample properties API for test, for the test environment with the beta environment. The sample property API will allow for users to create data in bulk from a small set of sample properties offered by EPA and NRCan respectively. There is a set of US properties, which is four properties, and one of them contains a child property. For Canada, there is 13 sample properties and one of them contains a child property. This API will only be available in the test environment, but the real use is to get some bulk data in your account. So you don't have to jump through all the hoops of setting up a property, all the individual web service calls to get up and running if you're just trying to test something specific. So we hope this will be very helpful for you guys as a quality of life feature. So we'll move on to the definition of this API. It is a post method with WSTest, and the URL is WRTest create sample properties. The URL takes two parameters. Both are optional, of creation count and country code. The creation count will define the number of properties to create per request, which is a default of 10 and a max of 100 per request. This count will loop through the set of properties and keep creating copies until the creation count is met. So for example, with the default of 10, it will loop through the 4 properties until twice, like 2.5 times basically, until it meets the criteria of 10 and copy them into your account. And they are the properties that are created in your account are valid all the way down to the meter data level. having consumption data as well, and they are uniquely identified with a property name and property ID. Then also the second parameter is country code, which is also optional. It is defaulted to US, but if you want to create Canadian properties, you can simply pass CA and it will use the Canadian sample set. Okay, moving on. So the actual creation count may differ from your creation count parameter that you pass due to the sample properties having a child property. It depends on how many times it iterates through the sample set and creates a property with a child property. And so you may notice that your total property count may be a little off, different than what the creation count is because of that. And furthermore, this account API is only available until you reach greater than or equal to 1,000 properties. Once you exceed 1,000 properties, you will no longer be able to invoke this API. And the response for this API is a 201 created. And then you could, to access your properties later, you would just do the get property list existing web service. Here's an example of the API within Postman. See the URL. As you can see, I only here a parameter is passed of 20 for creation count, which uses the default of US. This is an example response, which is just a standard OK response with the 201 created. Okay, and that wraps it up for me for the details of the 21.0 release. I'm going to pass it to Leslie now for the upcoming enhancements of 2023.
Great, thanks Josh, and hi everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. I am going to go through a handful of other updates that are going to be wrapped up in our 21 release coming in August, but aren't part of the beta release that was just occurred. It's not going to be in the beta environment. So we wanted to spend some time to review these updates, and they do interact with the user interface as well. Some of them you may have seen already. First, we wanted to take a little bit of time to talk through the vehicle dealership score preview process. This is a somewhat new process for EPA in that we are providing a score preview for all model updates that occur for US property types that are going to either get a new score like we have for vehicle dealerships or getting a model update for an existing property type that's going to get a refresh of the model. Our first go at this new process occurred in February of 2023 when we launched the convenience store score, which was a new score. And that process went well. We're going to do this again, and this should be something that you would expect from us for all future releases of new models. So the US vehicle dealership model will be available on August 28th, as Josh said in the previous slides. It will be available as a score preview. So you'll see the score preview metric field available in web services and also in the user interface for just vehicle dealerships. That score preview field is only active when there is an ongoing model update that's going on. So what you're going to see is the score preview for vehicle dealerships. And on that same date, we're opening a public comment period. So really the spirit of this score period, public comment period process is to allow for you as our partners and for your clients to kind of road test our either updated or new models and see how the metrics play out in your portfolios, read and digest and react to the technical documentation that details all of the, the construction of the model. And that comment period will be open for about a month. We'll have more published information about the timeline, and everything will be posted at the new website we have here, Score Updates. That's actually been in place for a couple of years now, but we're now adding materials for this new process here. And we hope you can engage with us. And if you've got any feedback, or if your clients or customers have feedbacks on this new model, please engage with the comment period. Once that period closes, EPA will gather the feedback we've gotten, post aggregated responses, and if there is an observation that leads us to a model update or change, then we'll work through that and put out another score preview and go through the process again. If it works out like it did for convenience stores, we got a lot of really good feedback, but it was mostly positive and nothing was, no one was, there wasn't any need for a model update. So we just shifted that from the score preview to a live Energy Star score, which is what will happen here. So as soon as that period closes, we will just launch it as the new score, and then certification for that property type will be open. The second update I wanted to talk through are the new APIs for custom use details and custom intensity metrics. This is a batch of new APIs that will be available for new functionality that is currently available in the user interface as of a release we had earlier in June. So you can play around with this feature right now in the user interface, and this next phase will be to introduce APIs so that you can do this within the environment. So we have wanted to do this for a while. This is actually a very good suggestion that we got from our partners to introduce some more customization into our metrics, and really to allow our partners and our users to monitor key performance indicators in a way that makes sense to their industry or their organization. So first, you're going to be able to define 2 custom use details for any property. That would be like widgets manufactured in a facility, or hotel rooms sold, students or teachers per school. And then building on those custom details, you can then define custom intensity metrics with your numerator and denominator and your units customized. So some examples here are site energy per student, water use per hotel room. You can read the list here, emissions per hospital bed. We are hoping that this opens up some more opportunities for you to use the performance metrics coming out of the tool in a way that resonates maybe a bit better with some of your clients that want to see these numbers articulated in a specific way. So again, you can please do go to the user interface and check it out. The APIs will be released as part of 21.0 Live. There will be no beta period. These are all brand new APIs, so there's no concern about any implementation being broken for existing APIs. And there is a linked FAQ that details a bit more how you can use this new feature. And then finally, the third feature I wanted to share with you, and I'm very excited about this, are new APIs that will allow you to respond to a data request on behalf of your customer or client. So this is, again, corresponding back to the UI. We have had custom reporting data requests available in the user interface for over 10 years now. This is a primary mechanism by which states and local governments request and then collect their annual benchmarking data per their annual policies that they have in place. So I know a lot of you are out there and helping your clients become in compliance with these policies and requirements. This API will allow you to go through the full data request response process from soup to nuts, all with the API. Currently, you can only execute that by logging into the user interface and interacting with the tool that way. So hopefully you can just keep this all buttoned up within the APIs, and this will perhaps open up some new opportunities for you to work with your customers and clients in these areas where data requests are being utilized. And this will also be part of the 21.0 Live release, and we will have further API documentation before that time. Okay, I think that is the end of our slide presentation for today. So I will turn it over to, I believe, Andrew Schulte, who is going to walk us through our Q&A. And we will end the recording here as well.
Sure. Well, thanks, Leslie.